So let's learn about class methods of Python. So a class method is a method that belongs to the class and not the instance of the class, and we define it using the class method decorator. And it always takes CLS, which stands for class, as the first parameter instead of self. Let's understand this with the help of an example. So let's say we have a class called book and we have a constructor to construct the object for the book, and here we have self, title, author and pages as the attribute. Let's also do the assignment. So self.title equals to the title that we receive, self.author equals to the author that we receive, and self.pages equals to the pages that we receive. Now I'll go ahead and create an object for this. So let's define book and we'll construct an object, and here I'm going to pass the title, author and pages. Let's say I give the name as The Hobbit, we'll give the author, and let's give number of pages, let's say 310. Now let's print this. So book.title, and I'll also print book.author and book.pages. So this works perfectly fine because your input is separated by a comma, and when your constructor is getting called, it perfectly gets the title, the author and the pages. But now imagine that you are getting this book data from a file, a database or a user input, and it comes in as a string. Let's say something like this, and this is the sort of input that you're getting for the book. And if you observe, the input is separated by a semicolon, and it is a single string that you're getting from any of the database files or from any other source. Now you cannot pass this string directly to the constructor because this is expecting you to pass title, author and pages separately. So now you have two options to resolve this. Either you can go ahead and modify your constructor, or you can write a class method to customize your output. And so instead of messing up your init method, we'll go ahead and write a class method to handle the string parsing separately. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll remove this for now. Let's remove this as well, and let's write a class method, and we have to use class method decorator. So class method, and let's define the methods. I'll name it as from string, and a class method always takes CLS as the first parameter, and CLS refers to the class itself. So we'll give the first parameter as CLS, and then we'll give one more for book string. So book_str. Now this is exactly where we are going to format the data. I'll take title, comma author, comma pages is equals to, and this was the example that we had taken earlier, right? So we are going to split by semicolon. So here book_str.split, and we'll split by semicolon, and that's it. Now let's just return the result. So return CLS, and we have to return title, author and pages. And pages we can convert into int. So let's just wrap it with int, and that's it. Now if I go ahead and create an object, I'll write something like this. So book is equals to book dot, and now rather than constructing the object using the constructor, I can call this method the class method, and then I will pass the string data. Let's also print the details of the book. So I'll print book.title. I'll use an f string. Title would be book.title, and then we'll have author, book.author, and then we'll also print pages. Let's go ahead and run this now. And here we got the expected output. We have the title, the author and the number of pages. So what exactly happened here? Because you are actually calling this method and you are not even invoking the constructor, then how did this work? So let's look at the flow to understand what actually happened here. So this line is calling the class method, wherein we are parsing the string into arguments, and then in the return call, we are making this call. And this is going to call the class itself, which is book in this case. And this is exactly what is also going to trigger the constructor. And that is exactly how the object will get constructed just by calling this class method. But also if you're getting confused and thinking that why did we not call the constructor directly, and then while constructing the object, we could have applied this logic directly there, right? So let's just go ahead and try that as well. So I'll comment the class method for now. Now let's take a variable as parts, and I will take this string here, and then we'll apply dot split. And now we will construct the object, and we are going to pass the values from the part. So let's say parts 0 will have the title, and then parts 1 will have the author, and then part 2 will have the number of pages. Let's print this book.title, and then we'll print book.author, and we'll also print book.pages. So we'll of course get the result, right? But then by wrapping up this logic inside a class method, you are actually keeping the parsing logic inside the class where it actually belongs, and you're also creating a clean interface, right, for object creation from strings, or even if there is any other formats in which you are receiving the data. And you're also making your code more reusable and readable. So I'll remove this, and we'll go back to the class method code, and this is also called alternative constructor or a factory method. Now let's go ahead and understand what are named constructors. So if you want to create objects using preset configurations, you can use named constructors. So let's take an example. I'll create a class called pizza, and let's define a constructor here, and we'll pass size and toppings in the parameter. Let's also do the assignment. Self.size is equals to the size that we receive. Self.toppings toppings equals to toppings that will receive. Now instead of typing toppings every single time, we can create a few ready-made options. So we'll go ahead and create few class methods for that. I'll create a class method and let's name it as Margherita. We'll pass CLS over here and we are going to return CLS, and here let's pass the toppings. Let's say cheese and tomato. Let's create another class method. Let's name it as pepperoni. We'll pass CLS and then we are going to return CLS and we'll return large, and let's pass the toppings. Cheese and pepperoni. Now let's create few objects. I'll create P1 and now here we can call the class method. So I'll say class method. So let's say Margherita, and let's also call the other one. So P2 is equals to pizza dot, and we can call the other class method. So here, as you're directly calling the class method, when the class method gets called and when this line is executed, this CLS from this line refers to the class, which is pizza. So it does something like this. And similarly, when you're calling this class method and when this line gets executed, the CLS is actually referring to the pizza class itself. And so it takes the values and it forms something like this, like as in the other line, this one. And that's how your object gets constructed. So basically you're constructing a new object via class method. So by doing this, you're just calling the factory methods that creates and returns a new pizza object with predefined values. Here we have the predefined values. And you can also use class methods to manage class level data. So let's take an example for that as well. Let's define a class and call it user, and we'll define two class level variables, default role as member. Let's also take user count. So this is going to act like a fallback role if no role is provided, and this is to keep track of how many users have been created. Define the constructor, give username, and let's give role, and let's say none for now. Let's do the assignment. So self.username equals to the username that we receive. Self.role is equals to the role that we receive, or if there is no role, we are going to give the default role. So user.default role. And let's also increment the user count, because every time this constructor is called, that means we are creating an object. So user.user count, we are going to increment the count. So this simply means every time we create a new user, this constructor will be called and we increment the counter by 1. Find class method decorator. We will write the method as set default role. And here we'll pass the CLS and also the role. CLS is anyway should be the first parameter, and CLS dot default role should be equals to the role. And by doing this, we are changing the default role for all users that will be created in the future, unless they are explicitly specified. So in short, this is letting you configure the behavior of the class without modifying the constructor. And we are using CLS dot default role to make sure that even if this method is called from anywhere else, like let's say a subclass, it modifies the correct class's version of default role and not anything else. Now let's write one more. This one is to get user count. Here we'll return CLS.userCount, and here we are calling CLS.userCount because when you do this, when you actually mention it inside a class method, Python knows which class actually called the method, even if it is a subclass of user. So let's say even if you create a new subclass like let's say AdminUser, it will keep its own count separately from regular user if you are using CLS. So let's say if I had another class here, right? I'll create one for admin. So this is a user class, right? And I'll create one for admin. Let's say class AdminUser, and we are inheriting from user. But we want to make sure that when admin users are getting added, we don't want that to get counted under the user count. We want to track admin count separately. So here your user count. Now let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll create a user and let's name the user as let's say Alice. I'll create one more. Let's say Bob. And let's create two admin users. So I'll give A1 admin user and let's give it as admin1, and let's create one more. Now let's go ahead and print the count. So we'll first print user, get user count, and then we'll print the admin count. So this is the admin class. So admin user dot get user count. Let's save this because this is inheriting from the user class, right? So we can directly use the method. Let me create one more admin so that we can differentiate the count because I haven't added anything else here. So here admin user, and I'll create admin3. Now let's go ahead and run this. Alright, so now because we introduced another class, this changes here a little bit. So we have to make sure that we are referring to the actual class of the object being created. and this. Now let's go ahead and test it. So now we have the correct output. So we have 2 users and we have 3 admin users. Alright, so that's all I had for class methods. So let's recap real quick. So you can use a class method when you want to create an object from alternate inputs such as string, a dictionary, or even a JSON file. Or if you want to define named constructors that return pre-configured versions of an object, the pizza example that we saw, right? Or if you need to modify or access class level variables, the one that we did here. So basically by doing this, we are separating object construction, configuration, and any class-wide logic. So that's it for now, and in the next session, we'll explore static methods in Python. So I'll see you in the next one.